Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. My name is Kerry Miller, joined as always by my good friend Graham Dorn. Graham, neither of our kids have school today, so we are recording. It's 11 a.m. on the East Coast, a frigid morning, and we're going to get into the ACC here. Let's start out with our North Carolina talk. You can just dive in, tell me how you're feeling about the Tar Heels now. You're a little bit higher on them than I am, but neither of us are feeling good.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit higher on a seed list than you are, but I wouldn't say that's higher on them overall. I think when I was looking at the end of the 5 seed area and then just the 6 seeds in general, just not a lot there, right? Like I was looking for anybody to put at 20th overall. Eventually settled on Arkansas, but I don't think they have a 20th overall kind of profile. And then when I got to the 6 seeds, I did have some options there that I thought fit, like St. John's and Louisville. I thought they fit in that area. But then when I got to the back of the 6 line, I just didn't have anybody I thought should be there. So UNC kind of ended up there by default for maybe a couple of reasons. One, I think their Kansas win's looking a little bit better than it did previously. And also, I think when you just look at North Carolina as a team, Caleb Wilson has gotten so much attention nationally, and I think the Vasar has been very good as well. I think when you look at those guys, they at least have some notoriety as individual players that I think could help in a selection committee conversation. And especially as we saw last year with UNC, it's UNC, right? If they're going to be close, they're probably going to get the name recognition that helps. So I do think there's something to be said for that when you have no options that fit. Sometimes you just go with the team you think is the most talented, and that's why UNC ended up 24th for me.
And no more Bubba Cunningham in the room, though, so we'll see what kind of benefit of the doubt they get there. But yeah, I mean, there isn't a human element of that. Right? You're supposed to take away the team names and just evaluate the resumes, but you see North Carolina, you see Kentucky, you end up having stronger opinions about those teams for whatever reason. I think right now, most of those strong opinions are negative about North Carolina. They played no defense whatsoever, but let's pull up the spreadsheet. I always have to like just stop talking while I'm doing that. I don't know why. Um, yeah, so Tar Heels, they are 24th or worse in all of the metrics right now. You were able to get them at 24, and I mean that's fine. That 7 seed area is, like you said, kind of hideous right now. My case with Tar Heels, they are 4-4 against the net top 120 at the moment, and with the exception of that win over Kansas that you already mentioned, they were all very close games. Had to come back against Kentucky, barely beat Wake, barely beat Ohio State. And even in that Kansas game, they were down 10 early and then just all of a sudden couldn't miss a shot for like 13 minutes. I think they still have a lot to prove. I think that game at Virginia coming up on Saturday is massive. I think if they lose that one, all of a sudden, you know, they're sub 500 against the top two quads, and they can really start slipping towards the bubble. But they are safely in for now. There are some ACC teams here that are not. I think let's go to one of them, the one that has fallen out of the conversation, NC State, who I feel like every year there's one ACC team that just pisses me off that we need to keep talking about them. Like last year it was SMU, had no great wins, but the metrics kept them in the conversation. I feel like that's going to be the Wolfpack this year, although their resume metrics are down in the disqualifying territory. Nobody's ever gotten an at-large worse than a 57.5 resume average. The predictives are keeping them alive because they have 4 wins by 40 points, but they've beaten nobody. How far did you drop NC State out? I mean, I know we talked about them a couple of times in the past week, and you were higher on them a week ago, but I think that home win over Georgia Tech really was a killer in your mind.
Yeah, they're in that next four out category, so not the immediate first four out, that next four grouping. And I still think there's a realistic path to the tournament. I view Virginia Tech, Stanford, and then you've got a space in between with Cal and then NC State. I view those three, Virginia Tech, Stanford, and NC State, as all being kind of right on that bubble territory. I think Cal, Wake, Syracuse, Notre Dame, I could still see a path for any of those teams to make the tournament, but I think the true bubble in the ACC is going to be those three teams. for various reasons. Stanford has the wins, but they also have the bad losses. Virginia Tech's kept a very clean profile, but without that win at SMU, they're still lacking that marquee road win that I think they're probably going to have to add at some point. And then NC State has the very terrific efficiency ratings, but they just don't have the quality ones. So I think all three of those teams really need to sew up the resume in various ways. And I think those three are going to ultimately end up being the true bubble in the ACC. I do think NC State's going to get a marquee win at some point. Will that be enough? I don't know. But we've seen that happen similarly with teams like Michigan State and Baylor over past years, where they just added one really good win. And that was enough for the committee to say, okay, you know what? We think you're pretty good and you've got a great win to back it up. That might just be enough.
To that point, they are at Clemson on Tuesday. I don't know that that would really be a great win, even though we both have Clemson as our third highest seed in the ACC right now. At Louisville, February 9th, at Virginia, February 24th. They get Duke on March 2nd, and they still play North Carolina if that counts as a big win. I mean, it's it's a quality win in the you know eyes of public opinion, but let's go to Louisville though, since I just mentioned them. I think they're getting very interesting from a 2025 West Virginia point of view, where they picked up some good wins early on and then lost their star player. Now we don't know yet if Mikel Brown Jr. is going to be back or not. We assume he will. There's been no word yet that he's out for good, but has missed 8 games. They are 4-4 in those games. No wins worth mentioning. Looked pretty bad in the first loss against Tennessee. They've been pretty competitive in the recent losses to Duke and Virginia. In fact, it looked like they were going to blow out Duke in the first half of that game. But at what point do we just evaluate the Cardinals on what they are now? Because the predictive metrics don't seem to care at all that Michael Brown Jr. BPI has Louisville at 8th, which is absolutely insane to me. The resume metrics have them in the 30s, which feels more in line with what they actually are now, maybe even a little bit worse than that.
Yeah, I think it could be a double-edged sword for Louisville. And what I mean by that is if he's not back, then it could be they discount all those things that happened early on in the year that really helped the profile. On the other hand, if he comes back healthy and they start performing much better, the committee could say, well, that was not the real Louisville. We saw the real Louisville with Brown, and that's a completely different team. So all of a sudden, they might say, yeah, those resume metrics don't really represent who we think this team is. And they would be totally reasonably fine moving them up the seed list for that reason. So definitely a double-edged sword. I think if it keeps going too long, we're going to start just analyzing Louisville as if he's not coming back. But the huge caveat is if he comes back, that could change everything. So really up into the air for their long-term status. As you mentioned, though, with those predictive metrics still as good as they are, and I thought they would take a bigger hit, they
Yeah.
really haven't. It's going to be Louisville performing drastically bad from here on out to miss the tournament because those predictives, they're just too strong. You just don't see teams like that miss the field because the committee has, for good reason to believe that team's pretty darn good if they have efficiency ratings up that high.
Right. Speaking of resumes that seem to be rooted in predictive metrics, Miami. You had Miami as a probably team in your tournament chances today. And I mean, before we even started looking at ACC, that one jumped out at me that you had them above like USC, and I think St. Mary's was also down in the maybe tier. Miami hasn't beaten anybody. Like I'm very skeptical about them even at 36 on my seed list. You're a little bit higher on them, but no quality wins. All three of their losses were by double digits. Like I'm still waiting to see something from Miami. How did you land with them as a probably team right now?
Well, two different things pop out with Miami in a positive way. 15-3 overall. You just don't see records like that very often at this stage of the year. Typically, those are the teams that are at the top end of the bracket. 15-3 means, to me, they've got some wiggle room. They can lose a few games that they probably shouldn't lose and still end up winning enough games to make the tournament. The other thing that they have going for them is the committee really values true road wins, and they have 3 of them right there over Wake Forest, Notre Dame, and Ole Miss against all three of those teams are not bad teams, right? Do I think any of those teams individually are going to make the tournament? No, but I can't say none of them are for sure going to miss the tournament either. I think all three have at least a chance of still making the tournament. So, do they sound that impressive individually? No. Collectively, to be 15-3 with wins over Wake Forest, Notre Dame, and Ole Miss and true road wins, I actually think that is pretty impressive.
Notably for Miami, because of the ACC's ridiculous scheduling thing, they don't even play everybody once. The team that Miami does not play is Duke. So they're not going to get that marquee opportunity. They play Virginia in late February, and they end the season at home against Louisville. So Miami's kind of like just going to be tightrope walking for a while without any really great opportunities. Their next five are against Florida State, Syracuse, Stanford, Cal, Boston College. I don't think any of those are going to be. Is Syracuse technically that would be a quad one game because Syracuse is 75 in the net. That's not going to go down as a quality win. Like they need to win, even if they go 4-1 against that stretch, they're going to be slipping because there's nothing good there. Uh, Sticking on the bubble. Last little bit here, and I'll give you a trivia question because I texted you something the other day and you're like, "Oh, this sounds like trivia," and then I just like had the answer in the text and you were mad. When is the last time that both Cal and Stanford made the NCAA tournament? But they play each other this weekend. They're both sitting there on the bubble. I think we both have Stanford in by a little bit because they have slightly better wins. Both beat North Carolina this weekend. But Cal got interesting again. You have them second out. I have them close. I've vamped enough. Make your guess. When did they last both make the tournament?
2008.
2003. It's been
I knew it
23
was going to be
years.
sometime in the 2000s. I remembered Stanford playing Marquette that year, and I couldn't remember whether Cal made it. That's what I couldn't put together.
Yes, and for both of them, the predictive metrics hate them. Stanford 76.7, Cal 73.3. That certainly points towards an indication that neither of them will make it, although they're both right there in the conversation right now. Um, how did you feel about them this past weekend? Obviously, both beating North Carolina and both losing to Duke. Cal put up a better fight against Duke than Stanford did. Stanford got their butts kicked.
Yeah, I think the problem Cal has in comparison to Stanford is just the lack of wins at the top end of the bracket. And I think when you look at Cal and Stanford, you both look like good teams. Neither look like great teams. So that indicates that probably over the course of the year they're just not going to win enough to make the tournament. But at least Stanford has that thing on their resume that gets your attention. And that's when you start to get down to that 11 seed range, you're just looking for anybody that has something interesting about their profile. Even North Carolina last year, you can say, well, they were so bad in quad one, and that's true, but at least they had a terrific out of conference strength of schedule and they won all the games they were supposed to win. Yeah, maybe they dropped a lot of games to the top end teams, but they won all the games they're supposed to win. That was something you could at least hitch your wagon to. I look at Cal and I just think it's a middling profile. There's nothing I really think stands out. Stanford has a better long term projection for me simply because they have something that will catch your attention if you're the selection committee.
Yeah, that Cal win over UCLA back in around Thanksgiving, like felt great at the time. Now UCLA is kind of not good at all. That home win over North Carolina. I mean, two wins over blue blood programs, but they don't really stand out right now. And Stanford has the weirdest resume in the country. Four quad one wins and three quad three losses. Can't wait to see how we deal with that the rest of the way. I'm sure they'll play their way in or out in the end, though. That'll wrap us up for today. The big game today is George Mason against George Washington. That will determine whether the Patriots are still in my projected field tomorrow morning. So make sure to catch that one. Until that next time, take care and enjoy the hoops.